Welcome to the Pardis channel. Today, we explain Deuteronomy chapter 5 in a clear and simple way, step by step. We're going to embark on a really deep, methodical journey straight into the plain, literal meaning of the text. No complex external theology, no hidden symbolism here, just exactly what is happening on the ground, verse by verse, in this absolutely powerful chapter of our explainer. So get comfortable, clear your mind, and let's dive right into this fascinating textual exploration. We're jumping right into an incredible moment. In verse 1, Moses summons all of Israel. Just imagine the sheer scale of this assembly, right? He gathers the entire nation together, literally thousands upon thousands of people, just to review this ultimate set of laws. He says to them, "Hear, O Israel, the decrees and the laws I declare in your hearing today. Learn them and be sure to follow them." Moses is setting the stage for something monumental. The atmosphere must have been absolutely electric because he's demanding their complete undivided attention. What he's about to repeat is the very foundation of their society. Now, to set our context, in verses 1 through 3, Moses grounds everyone by reminding them of a formal binding agreement, a covenant. Think of a covenant basically as a permanent treaty between God and the Israelites, laying out really clear expectations for both sides. And he specifically brings up Horeb. Horeb is simply the name used here for the mountain where God first revealed these laws out of the fire. Moses is intentionally anchoring their current experience right back to that terrifying, awe-inspiring day. He wants them to really feel the gravity of that moment because the terms established there are about to be reiterated right now. The really crucial point hits in verse 3. Moses says, "It was not with our fathers that the Lord made this covenant, but with us, with all of us who are alive here today." The plain meaning here is just profound. I mean, think about how legal contracts usually work, right? They typically end when the signers pass away, but not this one. This agreement isn't just some dusty ancient history. It wasn't just for the people who literally stood at the mountain decades ago and have since passed on. It applies directly, right now, to those standing right in front of him. It's a completely active, living document for whoever stands before it today. Verses 4 and 5 clarify the who and the how of this whole event. God spoke face to face out of the fire on the mountain, but Moses had to stand between God and the people. Why? Well, because the people were absolutely terrified of the flames. Picture a mountain completely engulfed in roaring fire, thick smoke, and this booming voice of overwhelming power coming from the center of it all. Naturally, there's no way they'd go up that mountain. So Moses had to act as the human intermediary, receiving the word of the Lord and declaring it to the fragile, frightened Israelites down below. He was the vital link bridging the gap between the divine and the mortal. Moving into section 1, we're looking at the 10 commandments. Breaking down the first 2 commands in verses 6 through 10, God first establishes exactly who he is. He says, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery." Notice how he doesn't introduce himself here as the almighty creator of the vast universe, but rather as their personal, direct rescuer. That makes the relationship incredibly intimate, doesn't it? And because of that direct rescue, the second command demands exclusive loyalty. "You shall have no other gods before me, and you definitely shouldn't make any idols to bow down to." God requires their complete undivided devotion because of what he specifically did for them. Moving on to verses 11 through 15, we see the command for absolute reverence of God's name. Don't misuse it, because the Lord won't hold anyone guiltless who does. Then we hit the mandate to observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Everyone absolutely must rest on the 7th day, not just the head of the household, but the kids, the servants, and literally even the animals. And verse 15 gives us the profound why. They have to remember that they were once slaves in Egypt, driven without any rest. Imagine being a slave who never ever gets a day off. Suddenly, rest isn't just a polite suggestion, it's a non-negotiable divine law. Next up, we see this really beautiful shift towards human relationships in verses 16 and 17. The 5th command explicitly says, "Honor your father and your mother." And there is a massive promise attached to this. Doing so leads to a long, prosperous life in the land God is giving them. Honoring the past generation ensures the survival and stability of the next. It builds this unbroken chain of tradition and respect. Then, the 6th command is incredibly direct. "You shall not murder." We move logically from preserving the family unit to preserving human life itself. These next rapid-fire prohibitions in verses 18 through 20 are all about building a safe, functioning community. Do not commit adultery, which protects the sanctity of marriage and family trust. Do not steal, protecting personal property and someone's livelihood. And do not give false testimony against your neighbor, which protects truth and justice in the broader community. Think about how revolutionary these protections were for a newly formed ancient society. You simply can't have a stable civilization if you're cheating, robbing, or lying about the people living right next door. These are the absolute bare minimum requirements for communal peace. Verse 21 rounds out the commandments by focusing entirely inward. It says, "You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. You shall not set your desire on your neighbor's house or land or anything that belongs to your neighbor." While the previous laws dealt with outward, physical actions like stealing and murder, this final command strictly prohibits the internal, psychological desire to take what rightfully belongs to someone else. It literally stops the root cause of the previous crimes before they even happen. The psychology here is just brilliant. If you conquer the internal obsession with what others have, you're never going to commit the outward acts of theft or betrayal. It all starts in the mind. So why were the Israelites so deeply afraid after hearing these laws? Let's look at the fascinating human reaction right here in verses 22 through 27.
These are the commandments God proclaimed in a loud voice from the fire, the cloud, and the deep darkness. And then he stopped. He added nothing more, and he wrote them on 2 stone tablets. But what happened right after that loud divine voice stopped? The leaders and elders came rushing to Moses in a state of absolute panic. We have a stark contrast here. On one side, the terrifying environment, God's glorious presence, roaring fire, and a voice that shook them to their core. On the other side, fragile, mortal humans. They tell Moses, "We have seen that God can speak to a man and the man still lives, but now, why should we die?" They were fully convinced that if they endured that unfiltered majesty for one more second, their mortal bodies would just give out and they'd literally drop dead.
In verse 27, the people plead with Moses to act as their permanent representative. They say, "Go near and listen to all that the Lord our God says. Then tell us whatever the Lord our God tells you. We will listen and obey." They're fully acknowledging the authority of the laws, for sure, but they are terrified of the direct delivery method. They're voluntarily stepping back and promising total obedience, as long as Moses acts as their proxy. Notice the heavy burden this places on Moses, though. He now has to step into the terrifying fire on behalf of an entire nation, absorb the divine laws, and perfectly relay them to the people below. Let's move into section 2, God's response to Israel. Continuing our verse-by-verse walkthrough into verses 28 to 33, we see exactly how God responds to their intense fear. You might expect God to be angry that they don't want to listen to him directly, or maybe disappointed in their lack of courage. But he isn't. The literal text shows us something entirely different and incredibly compassionate. Verse 28 says, "The Lord heard them," and tells Moses, "I have heard what this people said to you. Everything they said was good." God highly approves of the recognition of boundaries. They understood the massive gap between the holy creator and mortal humans, and God says, "Yep, that is exactly the right attitude to have." Verse 29 reveals the simple why behind all these laws. God says, "Oh, that their hearts would be inclined to fear me and keep all my commands always, so that it might go well with them and their children forever." See, God's ultimate desire isn't to terrify them just for the fun of it. His goal is their consistent, healthy reverence. And focus on that word always. This isn't about a one-time flash of obedience at the base of a mountain. It's about a permanent, multi-generational lifestyle. If they keep this profound respect and obey the laws continually, they and their children will safely prosper forever. Verses 30 and 31 lay out the chronological action plan moving forward. God tells Moses, "Go tell them to return to their tents." So the people are dismissed to go home to safety. But God says to Moses, "But you stay here with me." Moses remains on the mountain so God can give him all the remaining commands, decrees, and laws. Moses isn't just acting as a static messenger here. He is tasked with learning them deeply. He's becoming the ultimate teacher for the future, getting ready to teach the Israelites exactly how to live once they possess the promised land. Okay, section 3, clarifications and explanations. Let's pull out the really foundational themes that make Deuteronomy 5 so critical for our explainer today. First, the covenant is a living document. It's an active, binding agreement for the people standing there at that exact moment. Second, Moses is officially established as the essential mediator because the people simply couldn't handle the raw power of God's voice without fearing for their lives. And third, the laws themselves are perfectly balanced. The first half protects divine reverence, how we treat God, while the second half vehemently protects human dignity, ensuring we don't steal, kill, or covet. It's the perfect recipe for a safe society. Now for section 4, practical life lessons.
So, how do we actually apply this today? Well, the direct commandments against coveting, stealing, and false testimony teach us a really vital lesson. True respect creates boundaries, and healthy boundaries create a safe community. Think of it like fences in a neighborhood. Good fences make good neighbors not because they keep people out, but because they clearly define where one person's rights end and another's begin. When you control your internal desires and respect what belongs to your neighbor, you build absolute trust. Self-control and respecting boundaries are the foundational building blocks of a peaceful life.
We also learn the incredible power of memory and empathy here. By remembering their bitter history as slaves, the Israelites are taught to grant rest to their own servants. Remembering our past hardships should make us way more empathetic to others struggling today. Plus, by honoring our parents and those who came before us, we create a culture of respect that gets passed down. Think about it. If kids see their parents honoring their elders, they're going to eventually honor their parents too. This cycle literally creates a more stable, enduring future for the entire community. Finally, Section 5, Chapter Recap. Let's briefly summarize our journey today. We saw Moses gather the living generation to remind them of the binding covenant. We walked step by step through the 10 Commandments, from absolute loyalty to God, to resting on the Sabbath, to respecting the lives and property of our neighbors. We saw the sheer terror of the people, their requests for a mediator, and God's really compassionate approval. And that brings us to verses 32 and 33, where Moses says, "Walk in all the way that the Lord your God has commanded you, so that you may live and prosper and prolong your days in the land that you will possess." So ask yourself today, are your internal boundaries strong enough to create a safe community for those around you? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.